£70 million striker, now United's #1 target.
To use the term, having their pants pulled down.
Yeah, raises questions as to whether Manchester United know what they're doing.
Reminds me of where Alexander Isak was before he joined Newcastle.
Don't they just need someone Premier League proven?
Tarnish him with the Manchester United brush just yet he's not a Man United player, and we've seen what happens to players when they join Manchester United.
Yeah, the Man United brush is exactly what it is, isn't it? Yeah,
but,
players and managers.
But if we're being objective,
hello and welcome to Transfers Exposed. I'm Sun Sports' Will Pugh, and that right there, here for a Sun Sport reunion, is football broadcaster Kweku Afari.
how you doing, brother? Good to
all
be
right,
in your
mate.
company yet again.
Exactly.
Of course, this is your exclusive press pass to the hottest transfer stories straight from the Sun Sport newsroom.
Exactly, mate. We are here every Tuesday and Thursday throughout the transfer window until it slams shut on September the 1st, covering the biggest and the best moves and, of course, breaking down all the facts and figures.
Like I said, glad to be here. And in this video, we're going to break down the latest on Manchester United and their search for yet another striker in this transfer window.
Exactly, mate. Yet another #1 target they seem to have. Quaker, you are standing in for Sunsport's deputy head of sport, Dean Scoggins,
Where is
who
he?
you know very well, sunning himself on the beach in Turkey, as I said last week. And he sent me a picture this morning of himself watching Tuesday's show. A little bit late, by the way, Dino. It's Thursday now. And he sent me a picture with the pool in the background and Transfers Exposed on the screen in front of him. And I was like, oh, you're sort of starting early on the strawberry daiquiris or whatever it was. The bloke was at the gym. He was on the treadmill on holiday.
Non-stop.
Are you having that?
Yeah, actually, I do sometimes. Just because you're gonna indulge a lot on holiday, right?
Yeah.
And so you got to make sure you keep yourself in check for when the season comes on. He's a proud man, Dean. He likes the way he looks, doesn't he? So
He does. He very much does, indeed. Anyway, look, that's enough about Dino. Glad you're tuning in, though, Dino. Enjoying your holiday. Look forward to seeing you back here. Manchester United, though, Kweku, Benjamin Sesko this time. This is the back of Thursday's Sun. Martin Lipton, he's out in the States at the moment covering United's pre-season tour, of course. The intro here, Ruben Amorim will go all out to sign £70 million rated Benjamin Sesko from RB Leipzig. Sesk appeal, wonderful headline from the genius headline writers on the Sunsport desk, of course. The subdeck, £70 million striker, now United's #1 target. Now, Martin wrote an absolutely fantastic piece which formed the basis of Tuesday's show, talking about how United like Watkins and Sesko, but that Watkins is their #1 choice. Now, just 2 days later, we're reporting again, as are reporters and outlets up and down the country and across Europe, that United have now switched their focus to Benjamin Sesko because Aston Villa are now insisting that Ollie Watkins isn't for sale. Now, Aston Villa have been publicly insisting that Ollie Watkins isn't for sale for a while. The understanding is that if the money was right, Ollie Watkins is for sale. As with most clubs, every player has got their price, right? Now, the Martin story saying Sesko would prefer to a move to Old Trafford as opposed to Newcastle. Obviously, Arsenal did want him earlier in the window. That deal didn't come to fruition. They've now landed Victor Gyökeres. Now, before we go into the sort of facts and figures and the details about this quickly, what do you make of it? Because it feels to me that Manchester United are just sort of pinballing from one thing to another. And maybe, Villa have come out and said, oh, he's not for sale. As we've said, there's a price. But it feels to me that it sort of shows Manchester United or raises questions as to whether Manchester United know what they're doing.
See, people have raised that and mentioned that, and I understand that if you look at the history of Manchester United over the last 4 or 5 years. I have a different thought on the matter. I think Manchester United are being way more considered in this transfer window rather than, to use the term, having their pants pulled down. Yeah. They are being way more considered in terms of their approach for strikers, their approach for
This is Sunsport, mate. You're allowed to use phrases like that. It's absolutely fine.
But like he's if you look at Sesko, right, he's got a high price tag, and you look at links to Arsenal, not just last summer but also this summer before they got their hands on Victor Gyökeres. Yep. Sesko's a player that he reminds me, not in terms of style of play, but in terms of where he's at in his career, reminds me of where Alexander Isak was before he joined Newcastle. Right. And there was a lot of clubs that were reluctant to take the punt because the goal scoring record is not exemplary. It's not amazing. He's still a very young player, but we all see the talent. We all see the ability. And for Manchester United, they want to ensure that they get this signing right because you can't go anywhere in the league. You can't do anything without a striker that could put the ball in the back of the net. And if the choice is between Sesko and Ollie Watkins, Manchester United want to make sure that they get the right man to ensure they hit the ground running straight away.
But they wanted Ollie Watkins, right? So just, you mentioned about Sesko there, 22 years of age, 21 goals and 6 assists in all competitions last season across 45 games. There are concerns. I saw some really interesting stat comparisons this week comparing Sesko, Gyökeres and Watkins after the story come out on Tuesday. That Watkins was United's number one priority. Now, United's recruitment director, Christopher Vivell, and their lead negotiator, Matt Hargreaves, flew to Germany to try and seal a deal. Vivell was with the RB Red Bull group before. He was at Sesko's old club, Red Bull Salzburg, and knows Sesko very well. Mm-hmm. Now, as far as the figures go, he's got an £86 million release clause in his contract. United are trying to negotiate that down. Leipzig are happy, though, to accept 70 million quid, but they're not willing to really go too much below that. And we saw the similar thing with Brentford, right? They set their fee for Mbeumo. They dug their heels in. United ended up coughing up an extra 5 million quid or so to get that deal done. But as far as player profile goes, Sesko and Watkins are very different types of player, are they not?
They are. And you're right to bring up Christopher Vivell. He was at Chelsea. I'm very familiar with Christopher Vivell. He's a technical advisor at the club. Yep. He's now head of recruitment at Manchester United and very familiar with the RB kind of way of doing things. Yep. And if you're believing reports, he's the man pushing for a Sesko as opposed to a Jason Wilcox, who is pushing for Ollie Watkins.
Absolutely.
And there are two schools of thought. Ollie Watkins is, you'd say, bang in his prime, 29 years old, will hit the ground running. Sesko is a bit of an unknown commodity to people who just watch the Premier League, but Vivell is very familiar with him. So in terms of player profile, Ollie Watkins is that physical kind of battering ram that can also get on the score sheet, but has shown that he's not necessarily the most prolific. With Sesko, there's a school of thought that he will become very prolific, but in terms of physicality of the game, he maybe needs to work on it and bulk up a little bit more. So they are two very different players. I think the deciding factor will be the price tag. And you mentioned the Ollie Watkins price tag, and I mentioned the age. That's where I think the disconnect is. If Ollie Watkins was 24, 25, 26, we'd be having a different conversation. The fact that he's in his late 20s, it offers a different sort of issue to Manchester United, who in previous seasons have been criticised for signing players that are maybe over the hill.
Yeah, well, 29, obviously not over the hill, but limited resale value, right?
Exactly.
But, I know United have got to, they're obviously, because they're at the top of the tree spending-wise, they still have to balance the books, don't they? So although they wouldn't expect to make profits on too many of their players, which clubs just in that bracket below them would expect to do, you see it with City and Chelsea, right? The areas in which they make their profit are producing young players and selling them on, like youth product farming effectively, isn't it? Now, United don't really feel like they're in that situation or in that position to be developing, or they're not. They're just not, are they? They're not developing the young players. Now,
well, the young players that do develop are integral to their first team. For example, Kobbie Mainoo is a player that
true.
At Chelsea, you might be having a different conversation. Chelsea might flip,
at the moment.
Flip him for 50 or 60. At Manchester United, he seems like a crucial player that they cannot afford to lose. Garnacho is the interesting one. He's the interesting crux in this in terms of Man United doing something that Man City and Chelsea do.
Yeah. What, as in
flipping young players developed from the academy?
But do you think, again though, it doesn't feel like that's part of a strategy, does it? The Garnacho situation, that's more of a fallout because he was an integral first team player.
That's the byproduct of Carrington, right? That's the byproduct of being a top club. You're going to eventually produce players that go for a substantial fee, but it's not a strategy like Chelsea or Man City who develop these players to sell them on for a higher fee. So they are in an interesting position in Man United. And what I will say as well is that I have a little bit of sympathy. There is a Man United tax to everything.
No,
when Man United come in for a player, no matter what position they are in the league, they finished 15th last year, there's a premium on that player. There's an extra 10 mil added to the price tag. And when Man United are selling players, and you look at it in terms of their record transfer sales, it's not as high as a Chelsea or Man City because teams know they're Manchester United. So they are in a difficult position when it comes to buying and selling players because, like I mentioned, there is a Man United tax on everything.
It's funny how people assume, because it's Manchester United, the profile of the club, that they hold all the cards and that they go into all negotiations in a real position of strength. It's absolutely not that, is it? But with players or other clubs, exactly what you just said, players, all of those, the camps, the agents, and the selling clubs, or the buying clubs indeed, are so aware of United's weak negotiating position. And when that's combined with poor performance on the pitch, and it's so obvious that they've got, a bomb squad in there, a quartet of players now they got rid of Rashford, who aren't training with the team, who are 3 of them at least on 200 grand plus contracts every week. You've got like 600-700 grand a week. If you add Malacia in as well, he's not going to be on paupers' wages.
But that's why
700 grand a week just cast out
training the kids.
Yeah.
But that's where the sympathy ends with Manchester United, because they are effectively depreciating.
You put your violin away.
Yeah,
right.
but I've tucked it away. They're depreciating the value of assets, because
Totally.
Anthony is a player that had a very good loan spell at Betis last season, and by telling potential buyers that he is surplus requirements, he's training the kids, that takes 5-10 mil off of his value, and eventually we all know what's going to happen. It's going to get to the end of the transfer window, and it's going to be a loan with an option to buy. They won't actually get a transfer fee for these players, because every single potential buyer knows that these players have no value to you as a football club. The only value they have is what we assess their value to be when we're buying them.
Exactly. Yeah, you heard a lot of stories, haven't you, about United saying, we think we value Anthony at this, we value Jadon Sancho at this, we want this for Alejandro Garnacho. It's like, okay, well, in a market, an asset is only worth as much as someone is willing to pay for it, isn't it? And I totally agree. Just quickly then, Kweku, Nick Voltemada from Stuttgart, also linked with United, had a decent season for Stuttgart last season. That's a Sun exclusive coming out early this week on Wednesday. I'm not going to sort of press you too much on him, because I certainly don't think he's number one quality. United, of course, would, as well as that bomb squad we just mentioned then, they're quite keen to get Rasmus Højlund off the books as well. Højlund sort of saying, I expect to be a United player next season. I've got a contract. Again, you sort of think, fair enough, mate, but you're hardly ripping up trees and you feel like United need to move on again. I just want to pick up on one thing you just said, though. Are United in a position, given all your comments about Sesko versus Watkins, are they in a position at the moment to buy potential? Don't they just need someone Premier League proven, will go in, bang goals, do better than Højlund, if nothing else, even if Ollie Watkins doesn't bang 30 goals next season, which you think would be unlikely? I think it'd be a great signing for United, particularly now they've signed Cunha and Mbeumo. If them two hit the ground running, are they really in a position to buy potential with Sesko for 70 odd million quid?
Well, that's the crux of it, the price. They are in position to buy potential, because potential gives fans hope. Potential also may result.
They can lose it well quickly though, Højlund style.
100%. And again, that's an example of Manchester United getting their trousers pulled down by Atalanta. Højlund had one so-so season in Serie A, and they ended up paying 70 mil for a player that we all know is not good enough for Manchester United. What I will say is that they've got Premier League proven in Cunha. They've got Premier League proven in Mbeumo.
Yep.
They've got that already. And I feel like with the striker, especially in an Amorim system, maybe they can take a little bit more of a risk. If they hadn't got Cunha through the door or Mbeumo, then I'm like, okay, maybe you go for Watkins in the situation. But because you've got between those two, between 30 and 40 Premier League goals if they do hit the ground running, I think you can take a little bit more of a risk with a striker that, by all accounts, is going to be one of the best strikers in the world. We don't want to tarnish him with the Manchester United brush just yet. He's not a Man United player, and we've seen what happens to players when they join Manchester United.
Yeah, the Man United brush is exactly what it is, isn't it? Yeah,
but,
players and managers.
But if we're being objective,
Yep.
He's a very good player that if he end up going to Arsenal, we'll be expecting big things. If he end up going to Liverpool or Chelsea, we'll be expecting big things. Just because he's going to Manchester United, let's not diminish what we previously thought about this player. He's a very, very good player. Maybe they're paying a little bit too much for him, but I expect him to be a very good striker going forward for Man United if he does join.
Okay. What do you see then that tells you that if Sesko arrives at Old Trafford, he's going to be any different to Højlund? What are you seeing before or hearing before about a player who's performed fairly well on the continent, who's going to cost around 70 million quid? You say it gives fans hope, but they can also lose it very quickly, as I just mentioned with Højlund. What do you see that's different between the two situations or players?
From my point of view, as somebody who's only seen him in spurts and not watched every single Benjamin Sesko game, it's the ability on the ball. Yeah. It's the ability in tight spaces. Compares favourably, again, don't take my words out of context, compares favourably to Zlatan in terms of he's a physical presence, but he's very good with the ball at his feet. And that's the difference between him and Højlund. Højlund was great when he had space to run into. Højlund was a physical monster. But ultimately, in the Premier League, you don't get much time on the ball. Yeah. And if you're technically sound, you've given yourself an advantage already. You're going to grow physically. He's still a very young player. But it's the technical ability that separates him and Højlund. Again, whether that translates to scoring goals at the highest level for Manchester United remains to be seen. But I think that we're doing him a little bit of a disservice if we compare him to Rasmus Højlund, who, like I mentioned, had a so-so season before Man United spent £70 million on him.
Just quickly, Kweku, when you said don't take my words out of context, you talk to me or the viewers?
I've talked to everybody. I talk to absolutely everybody. I don't want to see the headline, Sesko's the next Ibrahimovic, but he's already said himself that was his idol growing up. You can see it in his game, in the way that he plays. You can see it in the way that he carries himself. And more than anything at any other football club, if you look at Arsenal, for example, what's the hallmark of an Arsenal player historically? Technically sound, is easy on the eye, can play football. If you look at Liverpool, they're more of an emotional football club, right? The players who understand what it means to play for Liverpool. Manchester United, it's all about mentality. If you look at the players that have joined, they've had so many technically sound players join the football club and fail. The only player over the last 10, 11, 12 years to succeed in Manchester United, Bruno Fernandes. Mentality. And I think Sesko's got that. And if he does hit the ground running, then I think we'll be looking at one of the best strikers in the world.
Whatever you say, Kweku, that's going on socials.
Don't do it to me.